Hello, welcome to another Read With Me session. I'm yours truly, Isabel Bedell, and I'm here to read with you. I am super excited to dive into the second and third chapter of this amazing book with you because we're reading The Psychology of Money, y'all. The Psychology of Money. And this particular book, like we read the introduction and the first chapter, and it already gave me a mind shift. It already set up a whole different paradigm, of how to look at money and how to, build that relationship with money, or how people all over the world have a negative or a positive relationship with money. So that's a really big one. One of my biggest takeaways is like he was mentioning in chapter 1 called No One's Crazy. He was just mentioning, he's like, index funds are less than 50 years old. And then hedge funds are like 25 years old. And consumer debt, it was just created about 20 years ago. So now how do we assume that we're all financial gurus? How do we assume that, the media or the financial gurus out there are actually experts in what they do? Like, no one is an expert in finance. It's an evolutionary thing. And one of the things that he mentioned was that it depends on when you were born and what era you are living in. Because if you were born in, let's say, the 1960s or even the 1990s, if you're a 90s baby, shout out to you, we never felt inflation. Like, we were living the good life. We were just like good, right? But that wasn't the same in the 80s or in the 70s. So depending on where you're at, that is where you have to get educated and understand what to do and put yourself in those awesome, lucrative positions to actually take advantage of. So I have my bookmark here. I put it as a $10 million bill because that is what I'm expecting very soon. So chapter 2, it's all about luck and risk. Let's get into it, shall we? Nothing is as good or as bad as it seems. Okay. Luck and risk are siblings. They are both the reality that every outcome in life is guided by forces other than individual effort. NYU professor Scott Galloway has a related idea that is so important to remember when judging success, both your own and others. Nothing is as good or as bad as it seems. Bill Gates went to one of the only high schools in the world that had a computer. The story of how Lakeside School, just outside of Seattle, even got a computer is remarkable. Bill Dugal was a World War II Navy pilot turned high school math and science teacher. He believed that book study wasn't enough without real-world experience. He also realized that we'd need to know something about computers when we got to college, recalled late Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen. In 1968, Douglas petitioned the Lakeside School Mothers Club to use the proceeds from its annual rummage sale, about $3,000, to lease a teletype Model 330 computer hooked up to the General Electric mainframe terminal for the computer time sharing. The whole idea of time sharing only got invited in 1965. Gates later said someone was pretty forward-looking. Most university graduate schools do not have a computer anywhere near as advanced as Bill Gates had access to in the 8th grade, and he couldn't get enough of it. Gates was 13 years old in 1968 when he met his classmate Paul Allen. Allen was also obsessed with the school's computers, and the two hit it off. Lakeside's computer wasn't part of the general curriculum. It wasn't an independent study program. Bill and Paul could toy away with the thing at their leisure, letting their creativity run wild, and after school, late into the night, on weekends, they quickly became computing experts. During one of their late night sessions, Alan recalled Gates showing him a Fortune magazine and saying, what do you think it's like to run a Fortune 500 company? Alan said he had no idea. Maybe we'll have our own computer company someday, Gates said. Microsoft is now worth more than $1 trillion. A little quick math. In 1968, there were roughly 303 million high school age people in the world, according to the UN. About 18 million of them lived in the United States. About 270,000 of them lived in Washington State, and a little over 100,000 of them lived in the Seattle area. Only 300 of them attended Lakeside School, start with 303 million and end with 300. 1 in a million high school age students attended the high school that had the combination of cash and foresight to buy a computer. Bill Gates happened to be one of them. Gates is not shy about what this meant. If there had been no Lakeside, there would be no Microsoft, he told the school's graduating class of 2005. Gates, he's actually really smart and even more hardworking as a teenager, with a vision for computers that even most seasoned computer executives couldn't grasp. He also had 1 in a million head start by going to school at Lakeside. Now, let me tell you about Gates' friend Kent Evans. He experienced an equally powerful dose of luck, close siblings, risk. He experienced an equally powerful dose of luck's close sibling, which is risk. Bill Gates and Paul Allen became household names thanks to Microsoft's success, but back at Lakeside, they were the third member of this gang of high school computer prodigies. Kent Evans and Bill Gates became best friends in 8th grade. Evans was, by Gates' own account, the best student in the class. The two talked on the phone ridiculous amounts. Gates recalls in the documentary Inside Bill's Brain, I still know Kent's phone number, he says, 525-7851. Evans was skilled with computers as Gates and Allen. Lakeside once struggled to manually put together a school's class schedule, a maze of complexity to get hundreds of students of classes they need at times that don't conflict with other courses. The school asked Bill and Kent, children by any measure, to build a computer program to solve the problem, and it worked. And unlike Paul Allen, Kent shared Bill's business mind and endless ambition. Kent always had the big briefcase, like a lawyer's briefcase, Gates recalls. We were always scheming about what we'd be doing 5 or 6 years in the future. Should we go be CEOs? What kind of impact could we have? Should we go be generals? Should we go be ambassadors? Whatever it was, Bill and Kent knew they'd do it together. After reminiscing on his friendship with Kent, Gates trails off. We would have kept working together, and I'm sure we would have gone to college together. Kent could have been a founding partner of Microsoft with Gates and Allen, but it would have never happened. Kent died in a mountaineering accident before he graduated high school. Every year, there are around 36 mountaineering deaths in the United States. The odds of being killed on a mountain in high school are roughly 1 in a million. Bill Gates experienced 1 in a million luck by ending up at that Lakeside school. Kent Evans experienced 1 in a million risk by never getting to finish what he and Gates set out to achieve. The same force, the same magnitude, working in opposite directions. That's a strong line. Really strong line. The same force, the same magnitude, working in opposite directions. Luck and risk are both the reality that every outcome in life is guided by forces other than individual effort. They are so similar that you can't believe in one without equally respecting the other. They both happen because the world is too complex and allow 100% of your actions to dictate 100% of your outcomes. They are driven by the same thing. You are one person in a game with 7 billion other people and infinite moving parts. The accidental impact of actions outside of your control can be more consequential than the ones you consciously take. Strong. But both are so hard to measure and hard to accept that they too often go overlooked. For every Bill Gates, there is a Kent Evans who was just as skilled and driven, but ended up on the other side of life's roulette. If you give luck and risk their proper respect, you realize that when judging people's financial success, both your own and others, it's never as good or as bad as it seems. That was a good one. Years ago, I asked economist Robert Shiller, who won the Nobel Prize in economics, what do you want to know about investing that we can't know? The exact role of luck in successful outcomes, he answered. The exact role of luck in successful outcomes. I love that response because no one actually thinks luck doesn't play a role in financial success. But since it's hard to quantify luck and rude to suggest that people's success is owed to it, the default stance is often to implicitly ignore luck as a factor of success. If I say, there are 1 billion investors in the world, and by sheer chance, would you expect 10 of them to become billionaires predominantly off luck? You would reply, of course. But if I asked you to name those investors to their face, you will likely back down. When judging others, attributing success to luck makes you look jealous and mean if we know it exists. And when judging yourself, attributing success to luck can be demoralizing to accept. Economist Bashar Mazumder has shown that incomes among brothers are more correlated than height or weight. If you are rich and tall, your brother is more likely to also be rich than he is tall. I think most of us intuitively know that this is true. The quality of your education and the doors that open up for you are heavily linked to your parents' socioeconomic status. But find me two brothers, two rich brothers, and I'll show you two men who did not think this study's findings apply to them. Failure, which can be anything from bankruptcy to not meeting a personal goal, is equally abused. Did failed business not try hard enough? Were bad investments not thought through well enough? Are wayward careers due to laziness? Sometimes, yes, of course. But how much? It's so hard to know. Everything worth pursuing has less than 100% odds of succeeding, and risk is just what happens when you end up on the unfortunate side of that equation. Just as with luck, the story gets too hard, too messy, too complex. And if we try to pick apart how much of an outcome was a conscious decision versus a risk. Say I buy a stock and 5 years later, it's gone nowhere. It's possible that I made a bad decision by buying it in the first place. It's also possible that I made a good decision that had an 80% chance of making money. And I just happened to end up on the side of the unfortunate 20%. How do I know which is which? Do I make a mistake? Or did I just experience the reality of risk? Good one. That's a great question. It's possible to statistically measure whether some decisions were wise, but in the real world, day to day, we simply don't. It's too hard. We prefer simple stories, which are easy, but often devilishly misleading. After spending years around investors and business leaders, I've come to realize that someone else's failure is usually attributed to bad decisions, while your own failures are usually chalked up to the dark side of risk. When judging your failures, I'm likely to prefer a clean and simple story of cause and effect, but I don't know what's going on in your side of your head. You had a bad outcome, so it must have caused by a bad decision, is a story that makes the most sense to me. But when judging myself, I can make up a wild narrative justifying my past decisions and attributing bad outcomes to risk. The cover of Forbes magazine does not celebrate poor investors who made good decisions, but happen to experience the unfortunate side of risk. But it almost certainly celebrates rich investors who made okay or even reckless decisions and happen to get lucky. Both flip the same coin that happen to land on the different side. The dangerous part of this is that we're all trying to learn about what works and what doesn't work with money. What investing strategies work, which ones don't? What business strategies work, which ones don't? How do you get rich? How do you avoid being poor? We tend to seek out these lessons by observing successes and failures and saying, do what she did, avoid what he did. If we had a magic wand and we could find out exactly what proportion of these outcomes were caused by actions that are repeatable versus the role of random risk and luck that swayed those actions one way or the other. But we don't have a magic wand. We have brains that prefer easy answers without much appetite for nuances. So identify the traits we should emulate or avoid can be agonizingly hard. Let me tell you another story of someone who, like Bill Gates, was wildly successful, but whose success is hard to pin down as being caused by luck or skill. Cornelius Vanderbilt had just finished a series of business deals to expand his railroad empire. One of his biggest advisors leaned in to tell Vanderbilt that every transaction he agreed to broke the law. My God, John, said Vanderbilt, you don't suppose you can just run a railroad in accordance with the statutes of the state of New York City, do you? My first thought when reading this was that attitude is why he was so successful. Laws didn't accommodate railroads during Vanderbilt's day, so he said, to hell with it, and went ahead anyway. Vanderbilt was wildly successful, so it's tempting to view his law flaunting, which was notorious and vital to his success, as sage wisdom. That scrappy visionary let nothing get in his way. But how dangerous is that analysis? No sane person would recommend flagrant crime as an entrepreneurial trait. You can easily imagine Vanderbilt's story turning out much different, an outlaw whose young company collapsed under court's order. So we have a problem here. You can praise Vanderbilt for flaunting the law with as much passion as you criticize Enron for doing the same. Perhaps one got lucky by avoiding the arm of the law, while the other found itself on the other side of risk. John D. Rockefeller is similar. His frequent circumventing of the law, a judge once called his company no better than a common thief, is often portrayed by historians as cunning business smarts. Maybe it was. But when does the narrative shift from you didn't let outdated laws get in the way of your innovation to you committed a crime? Or how little would the story have to shift for the narrative to have turned from Rockefeller was a genius, try to learn from his success, to Rockefeller was a criminal, try to learn from his business failures? Very little. What do I care about the law? Vanderbilt once said, ain't I got the power? Control over their time tend to be happier in life. Control over their time tend to be happier in life is a broad and common enough observation that you can do something with it. My favorite historian, Frederick Lewis Allen, spent his career depicting the life of the average median American, how they lived, how they changed, what they did for work, what they ate for dinner, etc. There are more relevant lessons to take away from this kind of broad observation than there are in studying the extreme characters that tend to dominate the news. Bill Gates once said, "Success is a lousy teacher. It seduces smart people into thinking they can't lose." Oof, what a line. That's a good one. When things are going extremely well, realize it's not as good as you think. You are not invincible, and if you acknowledge that luck brought you success, then you have to believe in luck's cousin, risk, which can turn your story around just as quickly. But the same is true in the other direction. Failure can be a lousy teacher because it seduces smart people into thinking their decisions were terrible, when sometimes they just reflect the unforgiving realities of risk. The trick when dealing with failure is arranging your financial life in a way that a bad investment here or a missed financial goal there won't wipe you out, so you can keep playing until the odds fall into your favor. But more important is that as much as we recognize the role of luck in success, the role of risk means we should forgive ourselves and leave room for understanding when judging failures. Nothing is as good or as bad as it seems. Now let's look at the stories of two men who pushed their luck. That was a good chapter. That was a good chapter. I would love to hear from you. What did you enjoy from this particular chapter? What did you enjoy? What did you enjoy? Oh my gosh. I just realized that I missed a whole page. Okay, I'm gonna go back because this is very important, okay? Because that ending was strong. What do I care about the law? Vanderbilt once said, "Ain't I got the power?" And he did, and it worked. But it's easy to imagine those being the last words of a story with a very different outcome. The line between bold and reckless can be thin. When we don't give risk and luck their proper billing, it's often invisible. Benjamin Graham is known as one of the greatest investors of all time, the father of value investing and the early mentor of Warren Buffett. But the majority of Benjamin Graham's investing success was due to owning an enormous chunk of Geico stock, which, by his own admission, broke nearly every diversification rule that Graham himself laid out in his famous text. Where does the thin line between bold and reckless fall here? I don't know. Graham wrote about his Geico bonanza, one lucky break or one supremely shrewd decision. Can we tell them apart? Not easily. We simply think Mark Zuckerberg is a genius for turning down Yahoo. 2006, $1 billion offer to buy his company. He saw the future and stuck to his guns, but people criticized Yahoo with as much passion for turning down its own big buyout offer from Microsoft. Those fools should have cashed out while they could. What is the lesson for entrepreneurs here? I have no idea because the risk and luck are so hard to pin down. There are so many examples of this, countless fortunes and failures owe their outcome to leverage. The best and the worst managers drive their employees as hard as they can. The customers is always right, and the customers don't know what they want are both accepted business wisdom. The line between inspiringly bold and foolishly reckless can be a millimeter thick and only visible with hindsight. Risk and luck are doppelgangers. This is not an easy problem to solve. The difficulty in identifying what is luck and what is skill and what is risk is one of the biggest problems we face when trying to learn about the best way to manage money. But two things can point you in a better direction. Be careful who you praise and admire. Be careful who you look down upon and wish to avoid becoming. Or just be careful when assuming that 100% of the outcomes can be attributed to effort and decisions. After my son was born, I wrote him a letter that said this: some people are born into families that encourage education, others are against it. Some are born into flourishing economies encouraging of entrepreneurship, others are born into war and destitution. I want you to be successful and I want you to earn it. But realize that Not all success is due to hard work, and not all poverty is due to laziness. Keep this in mind when judging people, including yourself. Therefore, focus less on specific individuals and case studies and more on broad patterns. Studying a specific person can be dangerous because we tend to study extreme examples, the billionaires, the CEOs, or the massive failures that dominate the news. And extreme examples are often the least applicable to other situations. Given their complexity, the more extreme the outcome, the less likely you can apply its lessons to your own life. And because the more likely the outcome was influenced by extreme lens of risk and luck, you'll get closer to actionable takeaways by looking for a broad pattern of success and failure. The more common the pattern, the more applicable it might be to your life. Trying to emulate Warren Buffett's investment success is hard because his results are so extreme that the role of luck in his lifetime performance is very likely high. And luck isn't something that you can reliably emulate, but realizing, as we will see in chapter 7, that people who have control over their time tend to be happier in life is a broad and common enough observation that you can do something with. Okay, that makes more sense. Even though the other one did kind of go with it. Wow. In the next video, we're going to go into Never Enough, which is chapter number 3. And it's when rich people do crazy things. When rich people do crazy things. That's going to be a good one. I would love to hear from you what you thought about this chapter. It has a lot in it. So it's like, I need some time to process, because it's like the yin and the yang aspect, right? It's the black or the white, or, the yes or the no, or the risk or the luck. But I love the fact that he's like, if you acknowledge risk, or if you acknowledge luck, you must also acknowledge risk. It's so true. It's so true. Okay. Really great chapter. Excited to hear your thoughts. I'll talk to you soon. I'll see you in the next video.